Hi, I'm Alan, and this is Prayers to the Dice Gods. Today we're looking at bases. The bases don't need to be overly complicated or even that scary. Now the point here is that we're looking at bases for painting an army. Now this is a very different process from painting a display model, because a display model you're going to want to make the base as fancy and interesting as the model is going to be. Now for your army you want something that's not going to be too much hard work. You don't want it to be a long process because, let's face it, you're going to have between 10 and 100 models to do this with, maybe more depending on how many points you want to play. So we're going to run through some nice, simple, easy basing techniques and one that's a little bit more complex but adds an extra little bit of fun for maybe a character model. Our first base we're going to try out is going to be a nice simple one. This is going to be one item. We're going to put it on, let it dry. Now I'd forgotten I even owned this one. It's a Grellan Earth. We're going to put it on nice and thickly across the base, get ourselves some nice crackle going. Now as it dries there's going to create cracks. Now I have over applied this slightly so some of the bits did fall off, but not to worry. All we're going to do is make that look as if it's got a slightly better texture by just filling that back over with a little bit more of Grellan Earth, so that it's going to give it extra bits of texture that otherwise we wouldn't have gotten. So our next base we're going to do with something nice and simple again. It's Vallejo Brown Earth. This is a really nice texture paint just to make your life a little bit easier. So we're just going to apply this nice and liberally over the top. I'm going to go over with the little spatula and give it some extra little bit of spikes, just because I think that gives it a little bit more interest, because we won't be doing anything else with the base other than adding some grass tufts to the top. For base number 3 we're actually going old school here. What we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves some nice sand. We're going to apply that to the base just using a little bit of PVA glue. Now once that dries, which takes a couple of hours because I did apply the glue quite thick, we're then going to go over that sand to make it look more like it's model sand, because although it's a really fine sand, it doesn't look like it fits in that universe because it's too big. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint over the top with a nice Talon sand. We're going to let that dry. We're then going to give it a couple of dry brush to bring that up all the way to white. We're then going to use some washes just to give the sand two different types of colour. I want one side to have a kind of golden sand, which we do with the yellow wash, and the other side is a thinned down Seraphim Sepia wash to give it two nice tones across the centre. Once all of that's dry, we are then going to add on some grass, but we're not going to add on any grass tufts. Like I said, this is an old school base, so we've got ourselves some static grass. We've just applied some PVA in the areas that we would like it to be, and then we're going to put the static grass on top of that. If you're liking the video, I suggest you click the like button as soon as possible, because there are some pesky orcs around here somewhere trying to destroy it. So our last base is a little bit fancier. What we're going for here is just a command base, so something for one of your HQ models. Now we're going to use some little bits of slate. We're going to super glue those onto the base because it will hold it better. We're going to build a nice little stack so it kind of gives us an extra bit of height. Once we've got the height that we're after, we're going to put some PVA glue on one side, and again with our sand we're going to apply that to the base. Now you notice we've only done a small section of that. What I really want to do is add some additional textures to this base just to give it some really good interest. And because I'm primarily a Warhammer 40,000 player, the extra textures and colours that I want to add to the base are very fitting for an alien typescape of planet. So we're actually going to use some Vallejo texture paints. We've got grey sand and brown earth. These add two completely different textures as the base goes around. We're also, once all of that's dry, we're going to add some red paint to the base as well as some Talon sand. Now we're going to do two different tones of red, and the idea is that we're going to blend them along their joins just to make them a little bit more interesting. Once those are dry, we're going to add a 50-50 mix of Nazdreg yellow with Flow Improver, and we're going to put that over everything. That includes the grey slate that we've just painted, so we're going to get the whole base tied together with the Nazdreg yellow over the top. Once that's dry, we're going to hit that with a nice dry brush of just a silver grey from Vallejo, followed by just a plain white over the top, and that is going over the entire base, so every one of the textures and over the slate. And as you can see, it adds some nice interest because each of those textures have caught that paint slightly differently, and that's exactly what we want. Now once those are dry, we're going to start adding the additional textures we were after. So we've got some grass tufts, we're going to add a couple of those on. We're then going to add on some lichen, just to give it an extra bit of, there's some other plant growing here, and we've gone for a white lichen this time because I want there to be lots of variation. And then going to add on something that looks a little bit like moss just onto a little patch of the stone, and that gives us a fantastic base for our HQ model. Now each of these bases take a various amount of time, and it really comes down to how much extra work you want to put into each one of your models for your army. Now for me, I tend to be quite lazy, and I know a lot of other players are, and I'll just use the texture paint and some grass tufts, maybe some skulls, just to give it a little bit of a break up. But in general, yeah, I'm fairly lazy when it comes to basing. Something I'd like to change, because I spend a lot of time painting these models now and I get them to a standard I'm really impressed with, so the bases now need to follow. And I hope that you will join me in that, and you will start to add that extra little bit of work into your bases too. If you have any extra hints or tips on how you would do your basing, or how we can improve ours, please feel free to add those to the comments and we will give them a try.